Let's begin with Hillary Clinton, though, and this morning having to leave that ceremony early. The official word from her campaign is that she, quote, overheated during that 9/11 commemoration ceremony. That is why she had to leave early. Take a look there, getting into the van. You see her wobbling a little bit as Secret Service helps her into the van. They took her to her daughter's apartment in New York. Our CNN national reporter MJ Lee is outside of Chelsea Clinton's apartment. And I know, just to be clear for our viewers, she was there for a bit. She left. She's supposedly at home, the latest we know, in Chappaqua, New York. But what is the latest in terms of how she's doing and what her campaign is saying?
Well, Poppy, we actually haven't heard from the Clinton campaign for several hours now. The only statement that we got from the campaign was late in the morning when the campaign said that Clinton did, in fact, get overheated. And that's why she left the 9/11 memorial early and ended up coming here to Chelsea Clinton's home. But we can report, Poppy, that according to law enforcement officials, Clinton did, in fact, appear to faint. I want to be careful to emphasize that this is not something that the campaign has confirmed. This is according to law enforcement officials who tell CNN that Clinton did, in fact, appear to faint this morning. We'll let you know if the campaign ends up updating us and gives us any more information on her status right now. And you're right, she did come here this morning to her daughter's home. And when she came out, she said that she was feeling great. She was smiling. She even paused to take a photo with a little girl that was waiting outside. No updates as of right now on whether the episode this morning will end up affecting her travel plans. Tomorrow, she was supposed to fly to California. She has a number of fundraising and campaign events scheduled on the West Coast. We don't know yet whether any of those plans will end up being affected.
Okay, MJ Lee, thank you very much for that reporting. Do stay with us. Last year, Clinton's personal physician did release a letter signing off on her health completely. That letter from Dr. Lisa Bardak in Mount Kisco, New York, saying that Clinton is in, quote, excellent physical condition and fit to serve as president. The doctor also noting that Clinton had been diagnosed with hypothyroidism and had suffered from deep vein thrombosis, as well as she had that concussion back in 2012. To treat that, Clinton takes something called Armour Thyroid and the blood thinner Coumadin. So let's talk about all of this with our chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Sanjay, I want to get first to what we're learning from law enforcement that MJ Lee just reported. This is not from the Clinton camp. This is from law enforcement saying she appears to have fainted. What do you make of that?
Well, you know, I don't know what to make of that. People use that term in different sort of ways. You saw the video. I saw the video. I'm not sure if they're talking about the point where she stumbled. Appears to have fainted versus someone who has fainted, lost consciousness, or had some sort of change in consciousness. I don't know. You know, I can't tell. So if someone is saying that, they saw that, and that's confirmed, that obviously would be another piece of information. But you'd have to piece it together with everything else still.
You're right, and we're just not going to do that. We're going to be extraordinarily, accurate with just what we see here. So let's have you look at what you see, Sanjay. Well, happening.
Yeah, you see her standing there. She's clearly getting some help while she's standing there. But, you know, look at these movements. She's has a difficulty with balance, clearly stumbles trying to get into the van at that point, and is then, obviously the door's closed, and we don't see her again until an hour and a half to 2 hours later, where she appears fine. So what do I see there? It's somebody who's clearly having difficulty with their balance. I don't know that you can say anything more than that. I don't know that you can say that she fainted necessarily looking at that video. But it's somebody who either because of dehydration, low blood pressure, something created an impact that obviously led her to have just difficulty navigating those few steps.
So let's talk about dehydration, Sanjay. If there was dehydration, you had mentioned earlier she does take antihistamines, right, for her allergies. Could that lead to dehydration, medication that one is on?
Yeah, I think the common things need to be thought of as common, first of all. So dehydration jumps to the top of the list. Again, this is all speculative, Poppy, whether it is big or whether it is small, it is still speculative. But dehydration comes to the top of the list. The conditions, if someone has eaten enough, drank enough fluids recently, those types of things you think about, how long someone's been outside. The antihistamines, we know that recently she talked about the fact that she's increased her dose of antihistamines because she's had these troubles with allergies. Antihistamines, decongestants as they're also known, they dry up your sinuses. They take away nasal congestion. They work well at that. Problem is they can also cause you to essentially have dehydration in your body as well. So higher doses can be sedating and cause dehydration type symptoms. So that's one place where you would look. Some of the other medications could play a role here as well, including the thyroid medication. But again, none of these things probably in isolation, but rather as a combination, and making sure that you realize that we still don't know. There's been no doctor report, There's been no statement, there's been nothing. She doesn't appear to have even had a checkup after that episode, so we have nothing objective to wrap this around.
And I'm just going to read the statement that we have from Nick Merrill, her spokesperson, who put this out about 90 minutes after she left the ceremony this morning. This is the latest that we have. He says she attended the ceremony, et cetera, et cetera. He said that she was there for about an hour and 30 minutes to pay her respects and greet some of the families of the fallen. During that ceremony, she felt overheated, so departed to go to her daughter's apartment and is feeling much better. We do know from her medical history that in 2010 she suffered a blood clot between her brain and her skull. Her doctor has since come out and said that is completely resolved. Once a person has a condition like that, has a blood clot, are there any special considerations? We know she is on blood thinners.
Right. Well, and so I think that was 2012, by the way.
Right.
And I think that one of the things that you think about is that somebody has had a blow to the head. They call it a concussion. A concussion is a bit of a misnomer. It is it's a brain injury. It's a head injury. And then she developed that blood clot in a blood vessel around her brain at that time as well. Apparently, she'd already been on blood thinners and developed this clot despite being on those blood thinners. What we have heard from her medical note, and these are not full medical records, is looking at the follow-up. There would be concern. Is there some long-term impact from this? But the follow-up from her medical note says she's been tested and there's no long-term impact to her brain from this, and that the blood clot is resolved. So she remains on blood thinners, but very carefully, Dr. Bardak, and I have the note right here in front of me from July of last year, said there was no long-term impact. There was complete resolution of any of her symptoms as a result of that episode back in 2012. But Poppy, I think you're bringing up an important point. She had a fainting episode back in 2012. We don't know whether it was a fainting episode today. You just heard it characterized as such by law enforcement. I think a larger question would be, what is the fainting episodes about? Is this really just dehydration, which it very well could be? Is this dehydration plus a combination of medications, which it could be? Right. But she didn't get a checkup today, and I think that would be important, even if it were a basic checkup. Forget that she's Hillary Clinton. Forget that she's a candidate for president. Anybody who has an episode like this should probably get checked out.
Look, this letter says that she had experienced no side effects from her medications. Talk to me about the medications that we do know that she is on. She is on Armour Thyroid for hypothyroidism, and she's on something called Coumadin. What are those? So
Armour Thyroid is basically if someone who has hypothyroidism, which means that they don't have enough thyroid hormone in the body. Oftentimes they will have symptoms where they'll actually be cold intolerant, they'll feel lethargic and tired. Eventually they may get a blood test that shows that their thyroid levels are low, and if they are, they can be given thyroid replacement, and Armour is one of the ways to do that. The thing about giving thyroid is that you're essentially giving now this thyroid hormone, and it can cause sort of the opposite symptoms. It can make people feel heat intolerant. So that could be where this overheating sort of thing is coming from. And also it revs up the metabolism. That's what thyroid hormone does. The Coumadin, that's the blood thinner that we're talking about. And again, she seems to have been on this blood thinner or some version of a blood thinner for several years now, and apparently was on it even at the time that she hit her head back in 2012. But despite that, did not have brain bleeding, which would be the big concern, according to her medical reports, but instead developed a blood clot in one of the blood vessels.
So why, you say she was on this blood thinner before she had that fall and concussion. There are a number of people 50 and older, 60 and older who take aspirin, Sanjay, right? Daily amounts, low doses of aspirin to keep their blood thin, right? What's the difference between that and being on Coumadin?
Coumadin is more powerful. It's a real blood thinner, and she had a history. I don't know if we had made mention of it yet, but she had a history even before 2012 of having what is known as deep vein thrombosis. Those are blood clots in the legs. You oftentimes can treat them with blood thinners because you don't want them to break off and travel to the lungs. So she had been on blood thinners even prior to 2012, and you can see there most recently in 2009. And I think she'd been on blood thinners since that time.
Sanjay, before I let you go, before this happened, the question about both candidates releasing their medical records or not to the American public has been broadly discussed. From purely a medical perspective, would that be valuable information to the American voting public for both candidates who are both, she's almost 69, he is 70, to see their medical records?
I think so. I've always thought that was a good idea. I think at a minimum, there probably needs to be an independent board of doctors who don't have a relationship with the candidates to vet this sort of thing. The thing about the doctors and the candidates, I mean, a lot of times they're friends as well as doctors, and that's one of those, I'm not suggesting anything that would come out of that's less than objective, but if you're friends with the candidate, we clearly saw, that we don't get enough information. We're getting just the summary of information. I think back when Senator McCain was running for president, he released his medical records for a short time to a group of reporters. I was one of them. It's a stack of medical records. We had several hours to go through that and sort of, derive your own opinions from that sort of thing. I think in this episode, at a minimum, it seems that, there should be a better explanation of what exactly happened today, and maybe even have her doctor be able to answer some questions about what may have precipitated what we saw today when she was going to get into the van.
Right. All right, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, thank you so much for all of that important information, and that is what we know at this point. Again, we'll update you when we hear any more from the Clinton camp on this. Sanjay, thank you. A lot ahead this hour. Americans have long paid close attention to the health of their commander-in-chief, so how could a health concern like today affect one's campaign for president? We've got less than 60 days to go. We'll talk about that. And the best indication of how an election is shaping up comes from polls in some key swing states. We'll take a look at how the numbers show a much, much tighter race than just a week ago.